My name is Robin Beavers, and I'm the CEO and founder of Blueprint Power, which is a brand new company focused on real estate, tech, and energy. However, this topic of real estate and tech is also has a special place in my heart. Over the last 2 years, I had interesting exposure to the topic as I was building out a corporate venture platform for Lennar, the largest home builder in the United States. And the theme of how technology is impacting real estate as we all know it is a massive, sprawling theme. So, for instance, we've all seen technology impact real estate from a perspective of a company like Airbnb, which has grown to a valuation much higher than most hotel companies, and it doesn't even own a building. We also have WeWork upending our commercial office space norms. We have intelligent on-site energy generation and software turning buildings into flexible resources. And I think we can all see the sweeping shifts in mobility are actually rendering things such as the conventional value of a parking garage, on its head. Everything's changing from a financial, design, and interaction standpoint thanks to technology. So I guess that means that real estate is important in new, exciting ways, but also that the convergence of technology is creating new opportunities and challenges. Just a couple more examples, and then we'll actually zoom in on a couple of focus areas. Some of the trends I also saw firsthand in my investment side was when I invested in a company called Opendoor, which is actually trying to turn the residential real estate market into a true liquid marketplace. And then I also actually spent a lot of time in fintech applications where there's many companies and entrepreneurs looking at turning the brick and mortar business and paper business of mortgage and insurance into essentially an e-commerce platform. But here, and just one more stat for you guys. In 2017, the venture capital community plunged over $3 billion into the broad growing category of real estate tech, which was up about 25% from the year before. But what I'm really excited about today is our panelists, our panel is representing large, established, trusted technology firms that we know and love today. And we're going to be discussing how they're exploring and taking advantage of the opportunities, not just by the fact that tech is present in real estate, but that tech is changing and evolving. And I think we have great examples of how these large established players are evolving with it. First I'll start with some short introductions. Today we have Candace Yu, who oversees utility business development, policy, and strategy at Mercedes-Benz Energy, which I think, that exists for all of you. We have Josiah, or is that how? Josiah. Josiah Kane, who's the Director of Innovation at Sherwood Engineering. He's built his career around holistic design thinking regarding integrated water systems, high performance, building ecology, and sustainable design. And then we have Matt Eggers, who's the VP of Yardi Energy at Yardi Systems. His background's also in energy. He's had innovative positions at Tesla, Sunrun, and Bloom Energy. And I forgot to mention that Candace has spent her time in the utility industry, both at SCE and PG&E. So first, I'll start with Matt. Yardi has been a trusted software and services partner for the real estate industry for decades. I'm sure if any of you many of you may have actually interacted with Yardi's products and services before. But it's mostly known for property management and more conventional services. So what was the original catalyst for this new focus on energy management, which you oversee, and what kind of future opportunities are you guys looking forward to?
Yeah. So probably most of you are somewhat familiar with Yardi, at least. Like Robin said, it's ERP software for the most part, and procurement and CRM and all kinds of other stuff. And the company got into energy and smart buildings, started to get into that about 3 or 4 years ago. And there were a couple of reasons. One, when we were looking at our clients' P&Ls, which are often held in our accounting system, one of the things that stands out is the largest controllable cost in a commercial building is utilities, after taxes and debt service. And so we thought, well, what can we do to help our clients address that big cost? Another driver was that we wanted to do something good. Yardi gives back an enormous amount of money and time of employees to communities and various causes. And And the company thought about how we could also just apply our business to giving back, and came to the conclusion that we could help our clients manage their energy and develop smart buildings that were more resilient. So we made a couple of acquisitions and started to build a development team. And today we've got, depending on how you cut it, about 50 some developers and operations people working in this area. And a range of products and services that connect into buildings and help them run better. And on the topic here of scaling smart and connected buildings, how do you scale these things? How do you make many more buildings smart and work together well? An analogy I like to think about is we all know, everyone here has heard the phrase a gazillion times, every building is a snowflake. Well, every laptop is a snowflake too. They all have different equipment in there. And imagine if Salesforce.com and many other cloud providers, it worked totally different on every single laptop. Not just a Mac or a PC, but every version of Dell, every version of HP. What if the features were different and the way to control it was different? In order to install Salesforce, or you don't install it, to use it, you had to go through months and months of upgrades and work on your laptop. Do you think any of you would have heard of Salesforce.com? Would there be a brand new building sparkling on top of San Francisco called Salesforce Tower if that was the case? Who thinks yes? No. Of course there wouldn't. And yet, that's the situation with buildings. The system, the equipment in them is unique, and the systems that run them are unique, and it's very hard to patch that together and scale the building in a simple way, or manage those buildings in a simple way and control them. But it doesn't have to be that way. Lots of industries have been like that, and they've gone through transformational processes using cloud software. These days, artificial intelligence can really help with these kinds of solutions to patch together multiple buildings in a way that makes them not only controllable from a single interface in one place and manageable, but also to have them work together, to have a group of 5 buildings play off each other in a demand response event. Maybe it got a little bit hotter than you thought and the batteries were draining down. So one building is cool because it's now in the shade, drop that one more and divert the power to another building. That can happen really easily with cloud software. So that's what we're doing at Yardi. We're taking those kinds of concepts. We've been running software in the cloud since the late 90s. We're applying that and artificial intelligence to buildings and making them run better. We have one just a few blocks from here, a big tower that's running our software, and we're saving them $100,000 a year in HVAC energy costs, making the building more resilient and hopefully making tenants more comfortable along the way.
Great, thanks, Matt. So Candace, we are in a unique moment in history where your experience in the utility sector is now incredibly relevant for a global automotive firm. So it'd be great if you could share some of Mercedes' strategy regarding the converging worlds of mobility and energy and real estate. As we see things like electrification of transportation and smart building growth occur.
Great. Well, first off, thank you so much for including Mercedes-Benz Energy in this conversation. I know I had talked to a few of my colleagues that I'll be here at a conference speaking on real estate, and they were kind of confused as to what I'll be talking about. But really, when you step back, the implication of transportation electrification is so massive and broad, and it touches so many different industries. And I think at the high level for my parent company, Daimler, our approach is holistic, and we know that it will require working with new industries, new business partners, and new business models. So in terms of new business model, that's kind of where my company comes in. Mercedes-Benz Energy is a startup team within Daimler that was established a year and a half ago, and our mission is to develop and sell new energy-related products and services that would complement the entire EV experience for the customer. And so we're still pretty new. So far, we focus heavily on residential energy storage. We've taken the automotive lithium-ion batteries that we created for the smart electric cars, and basically we're selling it in stationary energy form and working with solar partners in the US to deploy these technologies. And the bigger vision is really this entire ecosystem of products and services that customers need, and maybe some services that they don't know that they need, but would really make a difference to the entire EV experience. So maybe I'll just spend a moment to walk through that. So we know a lot of EV customers who are buying these vehicles for the first time are charging at home. And I think that this has been mentioned in several other panels, that I think 90% of EV charging takes place at home. So we want to not necessarily just make the gadgets, but we want to be the one-stop shop and provide the seamless solutions for customers. So we want them to have convenient charging. They might not know they want smart charging, but we want to provide smart charging. And we know that when an EV customer buys a vehicle, they expect sustainability benefits. So we want the charging to be done by solar and storage. So now we have a storage product in the market to support that. And it's not just benefiting the charging. We know that energy storage has so many benefits for the grid and for the customer, from unlocking the full potential of solar power to helping you manage your electricity bills, to providing resiliency. And in the previous panel that I sat in on the duck curve, I think one thing they didn't mention is that 14,000 megawatt ramp that's needed later in the day, that's all residential load. So, I mean, not all, but a big portion of it is residential load. And so I think there's a lot of excitement in energy storage around large-scale utility and C&I projects, but residential energy storage has a lot of potential. And we also see that the other angle is integrating smart home devices. So we are working on some projects related to kind of whole home, connected home concepts and working with home builders. And we also see a trend all across the country of zero net energy homes. And in California, I believe there's a plan by 2020 that all new home construction will be net zero, ZNE, zero net energy ready. And we know that a lot of buyers of electric vehicles are looking for homes that are EV ready as well. So that's Mercedes-Benz Energy. But at the larger level, Daimler, we're involved with not just electrification, but also a few other forces that's really changing the entire paradigm of transportation. So we call it internally CASE, Connected Autonomous Shared Services in Electric. And I won't take the time to go through all of that, but it's really, I think, exciting that scaling these energy technologies require kind of a different, almost more agile framework or approach, because there are so many forces that could turn the entire business model upside down. And so I think our team is one step towards helping accelerate that transition to electric transportation.
Thank you. I think that's a great kind of lead in to Josiah, how Sherwood, or in your career, has really been focused on the infrastructure that supports the built environment. So in everything from water and energy and the ecology that both supports and is impacted by the built environment and now technology. How is all of this evolving nature of the world around us impacting how Sherwood looks at design, your holistic design process?
Well, it's an interesting question, and it's been an interesting journey. How a sort of urban ecologist ends up on a technology panel is a long story. I mean, I think it kind of, to some extent, comes back to the Internet of Things, which, to some extent, has the promise to solve your issue. I've been looking at smart cities and eco districts for a long time, and there's a few things that that we're dealing with. One is that the players that were trying to own the smart city space were all trying to be proprietary, and they all created giant behemoth smart city platforms that were supposed to do everything, but we didn't cooperate and build entire cities on their platform. And so we have a bunch of systems that don't talk to each other and a bunch of buildings that don't talk to the systems. And so really the only way out of that morass is something like an Internet of Things that can talk to everything. And then you need software to untangle all of that. for me, that comes down to water, and I'm dealing with some really interesting situations. One is, I'm sort of here to disappoint all you net zero energy people and tell you that you're really only maybe net 75 or, I guess net 25, because 25% of your energy is sitting on the water infrastructure platform. And so unless you're dealing with your water on site with renewable energy to run it, you're really only accounting for 75% of your energy load. There's 17 states in the United States that use more than half of their water supply to cool thermal power plants. 38% of the nation's fresh water goes to cool thermal power plants. The smallest peaker diesel plant that we build takes about 12 million gallons of water per hour to run. So the Fukushima helicopter was definitely a photo op. They were not going to drop 50 million gallons of water an hour on that plant with a helicopter. What's also interesting is you sort of take that 25% of our energy load that goes to water and that 38% of our water that goes to energy, and you get these compounded issues that can only really be dealt with at infrastructure scale. And then you add to that we're losing something like 30% of our power to the grid because of losses in the distribution systems and whatnot. So by the time you get done just looking at those three statistics, it's obvious that load sharing, vehicles as batteries, all manner of sort of decentralizing our energy infrastructure with our water infrastructure is necessary to get ourselves out of this. And it's not really just about making our buildings more efficient when you have giant double-digit numbers like that sitting outside the building. So, I mean, I guess, one of the things I want to talk about is Microsoft actually asked me to be here. We're working on their new campus in Silicon Valley. It's got a 4-acre green roof sitting on top of most of the facility, native plants and growing food, also a lot of building performance. So that's reducing mechanical loads on the building in a high cooling demand environment. It's also a net zero building as defined by the Living Building Challenge for water, and that's a pretty big deal. And we don't have dashboards in water like you do for energy. It's just not there. And another big technology overlap with water is there's no real-time monitoring. So currently the status quo is that if you want to build a net zero water, well really, if you want to build water treatment and reuse systems on your property, even though it pencils out in anywhere from 7 to 15 years on a ROI-based investment, rather than what we do now, which is a 30-year bond on a single-purpose, lowest bid, sort of worst possible technology, public-funded centralized infrastructure. So we're moving towards projects like Microsoft where they see the ROI. You can contribute to municipal water infrastructure platform by creating best-of-class, innovative water infrastructure that's decentralized and has the ability to provide support to the municipal system to make it last longer. So there's a resilience component there. I think leadership, innovation, and resilience are probably, resilience / business continuity are probably the main reasons that we find ourselves executing water infrastructure on site. But then what you run into is you literally have to have a certified technician take samples every day and put them in bottles and then physically deliver them to a laboratory where they're tested by a third party, and then the results are returned so that a week after you have a water quality problem, you find out about it. Hopefully you haven't been causing problems for a week while you waited to get the results. And the regulatory framework in the state and locally doesn't really allow for real-time monitoring. And the reality is the technology doesn't exist to deliver the data that's required under the current regulatory framework. Luckily, I think where I'll leave this for now is that Paula Kehoe with San Francisco Public Utilities Commission just completed a multi-year Blue Ribbon Commission looking at looking at a lot of things, but one of the things that's really critical to the technology conversation that came out of that was what I would refer to as a surrogate monitoring framework. So there's other data than the data that's required currently that can validate water quality in a surrogate way. So another way of saying that is there are other ways to make sure that the water is safe than the current data set that we're asking for. And those other ways have real-time monitoring available. And so we're on some time horizon where it should be possible to see what your water quality is in real time, which allows small-scale projects, by small scale I mean like less than 1 million gallons a day, to do compliant water reuse. And that requires a big technology lift. And so we work for a number of technology companies and major universities that do research. So we're pushing on several fronts to try and get a dashboard, B, some technology that's capable of collecting the data we need, and sort of C, some sort of software platform that'll allow us to see that we're compliant all the time and to share that data with the regulators so that we can have much more sustainable and resilient and diversified collective water infrastructure platform.
Thank you. I think that's a great contrast too to how, not just how technology impacts real estate going forward, but how real estate, such as ambitious projects such as the Microsoft campus, can actually expose more user needs, where things are behind, where new innovation is needed. Almost creates a nice little kind of to-do list for, especially in the water industry, which is, it tends to be a little bit behind.
And they have
energy.
a really awesome automated building systems environment. And, so we're working with them to see how far we can get. It's hard to get people to invest in technology that validates a regulatory framework that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's complicated because there's so many external factors too that can maybe limit the speed of innovation that we're all hoping for. But I also think there's a lot of stories of like the consumer pull, right? Like your different categories of consumers who are wanting the new services you want to offer. So I guess to me this is almost as interesting as a business case study too, how your individual firms are evolving and recognizing and changing as the market changes, which is hard to do sometimes. So Candace, maybe we could start with you. I'd love to hear how maybe internally across different teams, you guys have a built-in customer base. You have a lot of loyal customers. Yeah. But expecting one kind of product for you guys. What's the internal process to understand how your customer is evolving as you can offer these new type of services?
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge because this is a new territory for everyone, not just our company, just throughout all the automakers. But I think there's just a lot of coordination across teams that have experience. So like I mentioned, the smart vehicles have been in the road for a while, and we've done many different interesting things with not necessarily things that are mainstream, but really important for the business model. So one of the case study I'll point out is we've built the largest second life energy storage facility in Germany that's providing frequency regulation to the German balancing market. And I know that seems like maybe not fully on topic with real estate, but it's just an example of how the business is evolving, where we need to think and consider the entire life cycle of the technology. So designing the batteries for its first use in the vehicle, taking it out to extend the economic and sustainability impact of the batteries, and then reusing it for much longer to provide grid services. So those are the types of ways that we're tackling all the different customer needs, whether the customer is the driver or the utilities, but all of it is driven by electrification.
And I guess from the Yardi perspective, also huge loyal customer base. How is the conversation with your main stakeholders, whether it's large building owners or REITs or whatever kind of corporate touch point you have when you say, let's start managing your energy consumption too? Is that an easy conversation or
Yeah.
a hard one?
It definitely depends. So our customers have gotten used to buying more products from us over the years. But when you go to a customer with something new, they demand credibility in that new space. So we had a very large New York REIT that our CEO was sitting down with to talk about something else with the ERP system. They wanted some feature or other, and he said, "But I'd like to talk to you about this energy thing." And so he told their CFO a little bit about our energy thing, and the CFO looked at him and said, "Anant, I know you know how to make good accounting and property management software. I don't know that you know anything about energy. So you need to prove to me that you're credible." So we convinced them to let us run a building, and it's working well. And there's the land and expand strategy that people like to talk about in enterprise software that I think will work for us there. And in the multifamily side, I didn't mention this at the start, but in the multifamily side last year, we started to develop a smart home product. And this is a case where just listening to the customers it's been really easy to hear that they want this. And who here has some smart stuff installed in your home? Raise your hand. What do you have? Lutron controls, thermostat, yep. Maybe you've got some Hue lights, Nest, some Sonos speakers, stuff like that. Who here rents and has something like that in their home? One hand, two hands. The rental market really doesn't have a lot of this stuff yet, but people want it just as much there, and it's starting to take off in the multifamily housing market. Yardi itself has about, I think it's 12 or 13 million multifamily units that run on our ERP system, and there's really strong demand now from the owners and managers of those properties to bring smart home technology into their units. The residents want it. And from my perspective, as someone that cares deeply about energy use, the environment, climate change, I think this is great. If they can get $100 or $200 more a month in rent from a millennial because there's a smart thermostat and some lights that you can turn on and off with your phone, which frankly I think I do it at home, but it's kind of a pain in the ass compared to just flipping the switch on the wall. But if they'll pay $100 a month more, that's awesome. There's huge demand, so we started a project to build this stuff and integrate it into our property management system, so the property managers can integrate it, can use the stuff too. But then that's a Trojan horse for us to have, maybe in 3, 4, 5 years, millions of units connected with smart thermostats that we can see and potentially control when they're vacant, to turn the thermostat up or down depending on the weather, potentially respond to demand response signals from the grid. I think the largest residential demand response provider in the country has a few 100,000 customers online. That's it. And they're all single family homes, and it's much harder to control a single family home than it is an apartment. So in that case, we're listening to customer pull and building stuff that will generate revenue and savings for our clients, and I think give us a huge opportunity to make buildings more efficient and effective and controllable, which I get really excited about.
I can say as a current New Yorker that the city of New York would have appreciated the ability to turn thermostats up and down during the Arctic blast over the holidays when everyone was gone.
Yeah.
Would have saved a lot of money and busted pipes. So I guess, Josiah, your focus on eco districts and these kind of scalable campus style or city scale systems involves a lot of different types of stakeholders than just customers, right? So how has that kind of change conversation gone with your partners, whether it's architects or real estate partners or the city governments? Maybe that's probably a too open-ended question for a couple-minute response, but maybe a fun anecdote or two of a good thing that worked or something that's easy or something that's hard in those conversations.
Yeah, the simple answer is that we love corporate and higher ed campuses because they're single owner districts. The hardest thing about doing a district is getting a bunch of different stakeholders to agree on how to capitalize and operate and maintain and finance infrastructure. Right now, I feel like, there are eco districts getting built. I don't know, I can't help but have the sort of linguistic conversation in my head about smart cities and wise cities. I mean, just because they're all hooked up to the internet doesn't mean they're well run. It just means you're on a tech platform.
Can I just make a comment on that? We often get asked for guarantees of energy savings with our technology that guarantees. And I like to say to people, our ERP software doesn't guarantee you make a profit. It just counts whether you made a profit or not. So we don't guarantee profits with financial accounting software.
So I think, I think the quick answer is, I agree. The technology makes it easier to know what you have, and knowing what you have makes it easier to improve on it. You still have to design your infrastructure and your city well. Right now, every square foot of real estate in the United States, on average, is being cooled 7 degrees because we built the city wrong and it overheated by 7 degrees. So the liability, you can imagine the energy and water cost of having just not really known how to design and engineer and build cities very well, and they're all overheating, which happens to be overheating cities is the #1 natural disaster that kills Americans over the last 30 years, more than tornadoes and hurricanes and polar ice storms and flooding. It's engineered overheating of cities. So this sort of district scale allows us to think not only about the technology and the infrastructure that's necessary, but also, can we unravel these sort of compounding spirals where the city overheats by 7 degrees, everybody puts in a cooling system that rejects heat, which further heats the city, which further exacerbates the cooling loads, which further exacerbates the energy and water demands. Can we do things like Arizona State is showing 10 degrees of ambient temperature drop by using vegetation and recycled wastewater, right? So you have shade and you have evaporative cooling, and you're suddenly on the cutting edge of 10,000-year-old technology. So I think we're at the phase right now where, can we use single owner district scale projects, essentially otherwise known as campuses, to build that sort of intermediate scale infrastructure that starts to unravel some of this at a scale that's effective. And if it is effective, which it's already showing to be, then maybe we can convince stakeholders to go through the pain of collaborating on P3s and collaborating with public entities they don't trust and with each other to make it happen. But that's the hardest part for sure.
I think we have time to open it up to the audience for some questions. If there's any. If not, I'm happy to keep asking the ones I want to ask.
Just on this issue of ownership, but also scale. So I've got these two questions. At what scale do you need to be at for it to be worth it to do on-site water treatment system? Also, at what scale do you have the management oversight to trust the user? So there's this scale. And then I think there's this retrofit of the existing city that you're talking about. There's a good number of these campuses, but there's a whole lot of stuff that's owned by thousands of people. Maybe each of you could say, at what scale does this stuff start to make sense?
Yeah, the quick answer, and I'll move on, is we don't really know. Definitely we're starting to get into parametric city design where you can model and you can iterate and you can find out. And we've built enough now that we can start to look at it. I mentioned ASU just because they're probably the top researcher because they have an urgent need in Phoenix around urban heat islands. But they're showing 10-degree deltas within a block, on the same block. So that would suggest that, urban design can have a dramatic impact at a 1-block scale.
In some climates.
In some climates,
Really only works.
yeah. I know UC Berkeley's doing some amazing work on exactly that scale. Stanford's doing great work on scale of water infrastructure. The city of San Francisco now requires any project over, I believe it's incrementally increasing or decreasing, but I believe it's at 40,000 square feet and up, has to do its own on-site non-potable water and that's proving to be cost effective. So there's actually some ROI to that. San Francisco did the community the favor of simultaneously allowing water to be shared between property lines. So if they're going to force large projects to do on-site non-potable water, they're also going to allow them to sell it to their neighbors, which is proving to be a valuable tool. So we have some large projects that are teaming up, and they put in one treatment system for 2 projects rather than every project having their own.
Well, from my perspective, from scale, the good thing about software controlling a building is it can be a building by building thing. The more buildings connected to the system, like any network, the better. The more that you can do that's more effective, especially if you're trying to shift load to enable more intermittent resources, intermittent generation resources. So, we're thinking about this about a building by building and then small portfolio basis, and also from my perspective, many of the owners that we install this software for, we might have buildings scattered all over a region or a state or the country. Sarah Neff at Kilroy runs our software in some buildings, and they're up and down the state of California. And she gets gains from scale from having multiple buildings in that system, but they don't have to be in the same place in order to save energy. So benefits from scale, but just from running a building more efficiently, they don't have to be. You can gain some of that one by one.
Any other questions? Or did you?
Well, scaling in our context is more in terms of electric vehicles. And as I mentioned, one of the things that we're working on is thinking about the entire life cycle of the battery technology. Other aspects are, customer-facing aspects, like creating a one-stop shop. And we might not build all the products ourselves, but we'll rely on these new partners to have these solutions so that customers are not, opening up a million apps to, one for thermostat or one for your charging, one for your solar consumption. So we're really thinking about scaling in terms of customer experience.
Yeah. One other point that comes up for me as I think about scale, like let's say our software is just amazing and it really saves buildings a ton of energy. Just take that as an assumption for a second. It still takes, even though there's artificial intelligence built in and it's smart software and it makes it easy, it still takes a lot of smart people to make it all work. Just like ERP software does or CRM software. And one of the major challenges in running especially large buildings is the aging of that workforce. And it's similar to the challenge that the utility industry has faced that I know you've probably dealt with too, is that workforce is aging and it's difficult to get highly skilled people to enter into the building engineering workforce. So, when I think about challenges to scaling technology in buildings, that's certainly one.
It's a great question too, because I think another big aspect, input to scale is capital, and how these different types of services and products actually change how capital is structured, and can, match the, you need your own new financial products too, whether it's to finance a home energy system, home energy and mobility system, or, fleets of multifamily, portfolios that are becoming more flexible, or, I can't even imagine to believe what kind of financial innovation is needed around new types of city-scale water systems. And I think all of that's another big piece of, all these shifts we're seeing in technology and how we design and use buildings and how our customers are engaging with that. The capital piece is always there too, and I think that's one of the hard challenges as well to scale. Any other questions? Okay.
I have a question.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to put you on the spot.
Mostly for these guys.
Okay, great.
But so we often, part of how you monetize an infrastructure asset is they're often bought for resilience and business continuity purposes. So, if you don't want your campus to go down, UCLA went down because they had a water main break and it cost them $20 million for one day, right?
Yeah.
So keeping your campus running is a big deal. $20 million would buy a non-potable water reuse system for the entire campus, just to give you some scale. So 1 day of risk, right?
Yeah.
But once you buy something like that, you want to monetize it. And I've been following the sort of battery as infrastructure asset since the sort of early MIT CityCar days and all this. And, you know, if we have suddenly millions of batteries plugged into the grid and they're automated and connected to some Internet of Things, and especially if they're not privately owned or they're Ubers or whatever they are, how outlandish is it to think that those cars are either going to be available or not based on whether they're preventing a brownout from happening at that moment, right? Because they're a battery. So cars become load management because they're mobile batteries that can plug into the infrastructure platform. It just seems like for 15 years I've been thinking that needs to happen. Are we close?
I'm not the expert on that, but I know that we're always thinking about those questions because there are so many different value streams to this mobile asset that you just discussed, and there's so many, benefits to different stakeholders, for the consumers, for the grid operators, for utilities. So it's really about clarifying those rules and clarifying the financial mechanisms too, so that everyone can benefit from it. I think there are a lot of companies or other pilot programs that are testing out, different aspects of that. Like you mentioned, sharing the infrastructure, so like peer-to-peer charging, and that's something that I know there are pilot programs on that, and using blockchain technology with the peer-to-peer pilot. So there's definitely a lot of ideas, but I don't think we're fully there yet, but lots of smart people working on it.
Does this come up for you at all?
Well, from my days working at Tesla, yeah, the Model S has a 100 kilowatt hour battery, right? So if a typical home uses two kilowatts, and the peak is happening at 6 o'clock or whatever in California, and one Model S could power 50 homes for
An
hour.
which is all you need.
That's
If there's like a surge.
it's a huge resource that I got to assume that people will figure out how to monetize and use. I hope so.
Yeah. I think,
Besides your question, how do people get paid for providing that service to
Right.
society?
I guess
Yeah.
my question is just how do you put that online so people can stop telling us we need to keep building thermal power plants because of peak, when we have 50 houses worth of blackout prevention sitting in my garage, and then they're selling potentially millions of those every year. I'm trying to figure out why we're still building peak power plants at that point. It seems like we have load management in our garage. How do we deploy it? Because when you have an infrastructure asset, what you want to do is you want to monetize it, because infrastructure is expensive. Like when we build a resilient net zero water infrastructure system so that when a big earthquake or a drought happens, a campus doesn't shut down, we don't advise our client to not use it until there's a drought, right? So, so what we say is, how can you monetize that asset that you've bought, partly to make sure it works, right? Because if it just sits there, you don't know whether it works until you have an emergency. Anyway, I want to say one thing that I think is important in this context, which is that this is not a conversation about privatized infrastructure for the wealthy and affluent and privileged, while not contributing, to municipal infrastructure. A lot of what we're doing is we're working with companies like Microsoft who are sitting on a platform right now. Their new campus in Silicon Valley has recycled water available, but it's unreliable, both in volume, pressure, and quality. And so what we're doing is, if you're actually taking sewage out of a pipe and using it to create non-potable water right where you are, especially when you have a large non-potable water demand, what you're doing is you're saving drinking water for everyone else, because your drinking water is not running cooling towers and irrigation and toilets. But what you're also doing is you're taking volume out of a pipe that otherwise might need to be replaced. And that's really important, because when you get to old cities like Burbank and Pasadena, who have old pipes that are past capacity, if they have to dig up all of their streets and go through big traffic problems and spend $1 billion putting in a bigger pipe and rebuilding a new street, and all they have is what you thought you already had, which is a pipe that'll carry sewage under the road, it's a much better investment for the city to do nothing and for somebody upstream to take sewage out of the pipe so the existing pipe can work for decades into the future. So that's just one example of how, I get this question a lot, and I just proactively putting it out there. It's not, wealthy campus owners divesting in municipal infrastructure. It's wealthy campus owners investing on an ROI basis to prevent potential liabilities from the municipal sector, and these systems are really intended to work seamlessly together. And I think that's true for energy infrastructure as well. I mean, cars, we're talking about the same basic thing, is buying a Tesla that suddenly can do load management for an hour of 50 houses. There's a value to society, and so I think it's important, when I ask that question, how do we monetize it is one thing, but the other part is how do we implement it so that society can benefit from having that asset?
Well, I appreciate those comments and all of the comments from the panel. I think this topic is broad and unwieldy because you can touch in so many points of systems change, new platforms of intelligence and data analysis and artificial, intelligence, machine learning, down to actual physical new products such as the cars we drive are turning into providers of new services. And it can be overwhelming just to even think about, but I actually think it's quite exciting in terms of the opportunities ahead. And thanks for showcasing that from the lens of the individual consumer all the way up to corporate business owners to city scale systems. I think it's impacting everyone, and I imagine the audience is full of diverse skill sets and expertise, and this is touching you in many ways we didn't even discuss today too. So thank you for joining the conversation, and enjoy the rest of the conference.